All right, you are tuned in to MMA Canada and very excited to be talking to an individual coming off of quite the victory at UFC Fight Night Edmonton, which went down on November 2nd. And a split decision W at the end of everything. Serhiy Sidey getting that win over Garrett Armfield, and great getting to have Serhiy on MMA Canada today to talk a bit about that. How are you doing, man? You having a solid day so far?
Yeah, buddy, I'm having a great day. Just, did a little physio, trained a bit. About to go teach some classes, man, but kind of just enjoying that post fight, kind of downtime, like just relaxing a little bit.
And it seems like you are able to enjoy it a little more and kind of be like, I guess, a little more at ease from what I can tell. Like maybe that's not the right wording per se, but it seemed like right after the fight took place, you were like, I don't even necessarily know if I won that fight. But then I'd seen you had a social media post talking about how upon rewatching the fight, you were like, oh, I could see a little more like the first two rounds going my way. Like obviously still mindful of, growth opportunities within that, but it seems like you have a bit of a more I don't know, I guess composed or maybe, if anything, different idea of how that fight verdict was right after the fight versus even just a bit after upon rewatching it.
Yeah, 100%, man. As soon as the fight ended, I from what my corner was kind of telling me, they were kind of like telling me that I was down the first two rounds, mostly because of that close split decision fight I had with Ramon. Like they were kind of trying to keep me like pushing, staying aggressive, obviously like not like letting off the gas at all. So then after that third round, which like I was like, oh shit, I really got to put it on this guy and finish this fight. After that third round, in my head, I'm like, damn, I probably lost this one. But then as soon as I rewatched the fight, man, I can totally see like how I won. I'm like a very critical, like I'm very critical of myself, man, my performances, to be honest, to the point where like I'm in that fight and I'm getting hit with shit or maybe like, getting taken down and stuff. And I'm forgetting that like, yo, I'm hitting this guy back too. Like I'm hitting this guy back as well. Like I'm doing damage. I'm landing the bigger shots, but I don't think about that. I just think about the stuff that's happening to me, because like for me, everything is just about perfect, like being like a perfect fighter, a perfect athlete. So yeah, I mean, I got back to the hotel room and then I rewatched the fight and I was like, okay, I definitely see, especially if the judges are scoring it, with like submission attempts and all that stuff, like how I got that fight. But at the end of the day, that was a very, very tight fight, right? It could have gone either way. And like you said, there's a lot of improvements that need to be made. And I'm excited to just go back to the gym and make those improvements, Fought a guy that's really, really high level, really early in my career. And yeah, I'm glad I got that win.
And that was kind of my impression, even just from what I've gleaned from talking to you, like just the inference I was making with that whole thing. I'm like, it's probably just him looking at what could be done better, like not necessarily putting down the things you were able to do well, but just I feel like your, I guess, approach is more attuned to like figuring out what needs to be built upon that much more to achieve that, perfect fighter framework that you were outlining there a bit.
100%, man. Even performance wise, like I'm like again, like bro, I've been like journaling about how like I've been feeling and how I was feeling that fight day and all that kind of stuff. And like I've got really good at like kind of like learning how to, reframe negative thoughts and kind of, be present in the moment. But now when I look back at it and like really like release like all the thoughts that I had, I realized that like damn man, like I was under like a lot more pressure than I let out to be. Just the whole fact of like you don't want to go 0-2 in the UFC, like that's not a good look, right? Like that kind of could screw up your career. And I had a lot of pressure, man. And I think I did a good job of kind of like pushing it down and like really dialing it in on the moment and like focusing on the event. But that fight, like I always talk about being like a flow state fighter and being in the zone. And that one was like I had a little bit of an issue of that. And I just think like it was all that subconscious pressure of like, okay, I got to get this win. I gotta, make sure I win this fight. And it sometimes tightens you up a little bit and doesn't allow you to perform the way you should be performing, right? The way you perform when you're carefree and loose and relaxed, and that's where those like amazing performances come from. So that's just another thing I kind of learned from there, man. And again, like next fight, obviously try to work on that as well because that's something that I need to do to be at the highest level.
It's just so interesting the, I guess, myriad of perspectives that can be at play in a sport like this because in doing my research leading into this interview today, I was like seeing like a bit of Reddit discourse among like some of the MMA fans and stuff, like kind of talking about not even just your last fight, but your official UFC debut. Because I mean, both of the fights split decisions, and I mean, you can always even within that make cases that either guy could have got it. Like there were some people in that thread who were even like, "Oh man, I could have seen him, getting that against Taveras and whatnot." But yeah, it just shows how it can be like such like a game of inches sometimes, and there can be like such, I guess, defined opinions one way or the other when you have fights that have like a certain level of closeness, I guess.
Yeah, 100%, man. Two close fights. This next one, bro, I'm gonna make sure it's not close. I really like. I'm eager to like prove it to everyone and prove it to myself that I can finish fights. I'm a finisher, man. And just two tough fights, two hard opponents, two close fights, man. But like that's what's gonna happen when I'm fighting these high level guys. So I just got to keep separating myself more and more.
I think that's the thing though, sometimes is like, I don't know, I think sometimes it can, and you are a proven finisher, like you're correct, but I think sometimes there's that like shorthand in the sport sometimes where like if a guy goes the distance, it's like indicative that it's not as exciting. But I felt like your UFC debut was like the fight that people were talking about really the most after the fact, like at least in as far as like bell to bell, like high octane action sort of thing. And not that you're necessarily thinking of this as like the next fight per se, but there's even a certain narrative thread to where you and Ramon Taveras could have like quite the compelling rubber match down the line at some point, just with what happened with the Contender Series fight and then the close nature of that war you guys had at UFC 297. Like I'm sure there would be quite a few fans who wouldn't mind seeing that rubber match and stuff like that. Like it seems like there's something there at some point down the line. But yeah.
100%. I think that'd be a sick fight if we both kind of like win fights, right, and kind of get a little bit higher up in the rankings, and then yeah, you do a third fight. I think that's a great idea. Um, for sure. I feel like if we both win, and we can really grow this thing out, because you're not the first person who said that. Like a lot of people message me like excited for that third fight, and I'm like, yeah, man, like it'll happen if he keeps being successful. I'll keep being successful. It'll be a great fight, a great trilogy fight for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Just so many, cool options for you at this juncture, it would seem like. And I kind of referenced like how many people were talking about your UFC debut. Like that really seemed like the case with, Tim Welch and Sean O'Malley. I think you had described it as a full circle kind of moment, just how much Tim has been an influence on your self-improvement game. And you were saying you've been like listening to their show since day one. So hearing you get shouted out on the podcast was a pretty big thing for you. And just seeing what happened now, whereby it looked like you were getting in some work with Tim Welch and some of the lads at MMA Lab, it's just cool how some of this stuff pans out.
Bro, it's a movie. I remember the morning I woke up and I was like, okay, like I was in Arizona already, and I remember like being like, holy shit, I'm about to go drive and train with Sean's strength conditioning coach Brendan Harris, do a one-on-one private with him, and then from there drive and train with Tim and chill at the podcast studio. And I was like pinching myself. I'm like, no way this is happening right now. But yeah, going down there was huge for me. I'm gonna be going down there consistently. MMA Lab, man. That's the John Croucher and the MMA Lab. All those guys, they're amazing. They welcomed me so much, and I got such good work with such high level guys. And then Tim also welcomed me to his spot, so I trained with him. And then yeah, Brendan Harris, who's a strength conditioning coach, but like has a great emphasis on like mindfulness and breath and all that kind of stuff too. Kind of mixing in like a spiritual approach to the strength and conditioning, right? All those guys, man, like I just felt like such an instant connection. Like I belong to be around these people and learn from them. And I will definitely be splitting my camps up where I'm gonna be going training down there and then come finishing it off down here in Canada.
Yeah, and I'm kind of intrigued. Like, did you get a chance to get in any work with Sean O'Malley just because him and Tim Welch have such connectivity to each other? Like, were you able to get in work at all with the former UFC bantamweight champion?
No, unfortunately, no, man, because it was right after the Marab fight and he had to get a hip surgery. So he was at the gym hanging out. Like I met him quickly, briefly, but yeah, unfortunately he was out, bro. But like I got a lot of work in with some of the other guys Tim trains, man, and there's some elite guys down there, man. Elite guys. So and then at the MMA lab there, I was like got a lot of work in with like Marcus McGee's fighting this weekend, in New York. He's freaking awesome. And then Kyler Phillips too. So those are awesome rounds with really high level guys.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I guess I'd be curious to get some insights from you, just being that you're, a rising bantamweight and mentioning O'Malley's name a couple times. Like what do you kind of see playing out with the title picture? Do you think O'Malley ends up getting that immediate rematch with Merab Dvalishvili, or could you see a scenario where Umar Nurmagomedov ends up being the one that challenges for the bantamweight title?
Yeah, honestly, I see both, but like I feel like the O'Malley fight would the O'Malley Marab fight would be the move the UFC is probably gonna pull, man. Like again, like I feel like that's where the views are, and I feel like at the end of the day, Marab's awesome and stuff, but I think the UFC wants O'Malley to be the champ, man. Like I think he's the draw, right? He gets the views. So I think they're gonna do that rematch, man. But if you want my honest opinion, I think if Umar fights either of them, Umar is gonna take that. Like that guy is like a different level, man. So it'd be interesting, man. I think for Marab's sake, like I would say, if he's trying to make, like if he's trying to make a lot of money and get a lot of hype, the O'Malley fight would be the move.
Yeah, I mean, just such an exciting division, so deep and so much going on, but in kind of redirecting the focus back to your fight, I'd be curious to get some insights into some adversity that you had to deal with in the lead up, like just with that deep cut you had there. And I was seeing per your social media that you had to get 20 stitches just 4 weeks out from the fight and having to adapt your camp within that and just not being certain if you would even heal in time. Like, how much of a mental battle was that? And I guess what adaptations to your camp did you end up making to get you in there and get you in there for fight night and stuff like that?
Yeah, so 4 weeks out, I'm sparring. I come back from the lab, literally the first sparring session back from the lab. I'm healthy, like everything's great, like didn't get any injuries out there. And then I just end up shooting. I felt great moving around, shoot a takedown, get sliced with a knee, just kind of grazes me, right? Like don't actually feel the contact. But I remember like a second later, like my arms around the hips, and then I just feel all this blood. And I just like let go and I like look at my coach and he's like, holy shit. And like it was he said like literally at that moment he's like that's the biggest cut I've ever seen, and I was like oh because I haven't seen it yet, right? Like I'm like oh god.
Yeah.
And yeah, it ended up being 20 stitches. Like they saw my skull through the like literally through my cut. Like the doctors saw my skull. They did 2 layers of stitches, seven layers inside, 13 layers to the outside there. And it was super stressful, man, because my like the reason like even like people were trying to like like do interviews with me, bro. My eye was so swollen, like it just all swelled up, right? And like I like couldn't even hide it, man. Like just got the stitches. Luckily, man, like I ended up getting a guy from the Ontario Athletic Commission who stitched me up. Um, his name is Mark. He's man saved my life because he did probably the best job anybody can possibly do. No ER doctor is going to be able to stitch me up the way a guy who stitches up fighters for a living does. So he gave me the best like opportunity to succeed that way. And then luckily I was going to physio every single day, getting red light lasers on my skin, helping with that healing. But every day I would wake up, look in the mirror, man, and be like, touching the cut, and it was super, super sensitive. And yeah, it was a lot of stress, man. I pretty much just hit pads and did the Airdyne bike for most of the rest of the camp, like just kind of mixing those two things up. Got a little bit of light sparring and grappling in at the end, but I'm talking like super light, right? Because there was like, if I opened up that cut even slightly, there all my chances of fighting would be over. So that was a tough one, man. But like I always say, man, like adversity builds character, man. Adversity makes me stronger, and like that's just something every morning I would sit down on my journal and I would write that down, remind myself that like at the end of the day, like this obstacle here is like the way to growth, right? So I'm just gonna have to deal with it, man. And at the end of the day, it was like a high risk, high reward opportunity, man. It's like I'm not pulling out of this fight, like I don't want to do that to the UFC. And I still thought like I still knew like I had good chances, and took a gamble, man. The gamble went my way. Thank God the cut didn't open up.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I guess, taking it back to just your assessment of like the verdict of the fight initially, like in kind of like the waning moments when you were in that post-fight presser, it seemed like that was something that drew a lot of like positive feedback from not even just, fans, but also fighters alike. Like I noticed Aljamain Sterling, the former UFC bantamweight champion, took to social media to express his opinion on the fight. And I guess just even talking about how you, went about like expressing yourself in that moment and just being so forthright. Like, is that something that you've kind of noticed in recent times as well? Like a certain, I guess, additional groundswell of support for, I guess, that candor and I guess transparency in that moment and all that?
Yeah, I definitely noticed it, man. And at the end of the day, like I just I was just trying to be real with everyone and real with myself and truthful, man. Like that's just how I felt at that moment. And like I was just good. I just wanted to be fully honest, fully transparent, how I thought. I wasn't gonna make up things that like, oh yeah, I fucking definitely won every round, like blah blah blah, like you hear other people do. And I think people just appreciate that level of honesty and stuff. And yeah, I'm glad I got that support. It wasn't something I was like obviously chasing, but I mean, it's definitely nice to hear. And it's a positive reinforcement that as long as I'm on the authentic path, my own authentic path, like good things come, man. And positivity comes from that as well.
Yeah, and I guess I'm curious to get your thoughts on if you noticed any differences just with this being the first event the UFC has done whereby the amended unified MMA rule set was a thing, just allowing 12 to 6 elbows and I guess the differing definition of what constitutes a grounded opponent. Like, was that something that not even necessarily in a sequence that manifested in the fight where you could, I guess, engage within this newer rule set, but even just like preparing for it, like was there any differences at all, or I guess just general thoughts on like the new amendments to the unified rules of mixed martial arts?
Yeah, a little bit like, the grounding rule definitely like when like I'd be, wrestling, like we do raw wrestling rounds and stuff like that. Like Lyndon, like my coach Lyndon would like be mindful, hey man, like you can get knee here, like or like you can knee here, right? So just kind of like the awareness of okay, like now I gotta understand what 3 point like the proper contact points and like, understand where I can knee you in the face and where I can't knee you in the face and just having that a little bit of that awareness. I didn't really feel anything about the elbows. I mean, other than I think Garrett hit me with one of the 12 to 6 elbows. And I was like, oh shit. Like didn't even realize. But yeah, like I in the back I pretty much like listened to the rules again. And then I was just like, you know what, if there's moments and opportunities that present themselves, I'll go with it, I'll flow with it, but it's not something I'm gonna be like forcing or like fully like looking for, right? So yeah. I mean, the opportunities didn't present themselves as much this fight, but again, like I'm sure they will in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting scenario. I mean, I feel like we haven't really seen, I guess, I mean, it's super early in the, I guess, utilization of these newer rules, but I feel like we haven't really seen I guess, a great deal of those techniques being utilized. Like, I guess Jillian Robertson, I mean, shout out to another Canadian MMA fighter. I think she technically got the first legal 12 to 6 elbow landed in her last fight there. So I guess there's like a certain level of difference. But yeah, I think maybe like a bit more breathing room and, see what happens. I guess it's not even 2 weeks since the new rules were instantiated for the UFC. So it'll be interesting to see how the meta game shifts within MMA competition.
Yeah, 100%, man. I think the like you said, the longer it goes, man, and the more people just kind of get a like, like sometimes like you might get to that position and not even be aware you can throw it still, right? Because it's been so programmed in one direction. So I'm sure it'll come out and yeah, definitely some of those wrestling positions, front headlock where guys are trying to pull out there. I'm sure we'll see some nasty knees or stuff from those positions eventually.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a chance for guys to, I don't know, I guess just get more creative with it. I guess a question that I kind of thought to pose to you just because, I mean, a big year you had, I mean, a pair of UFC fights transpiring in different parts of Canada and whatnot, and some exciting outings throughout. I guess thinking to the future, like if we're talking this time next year, like what is going on in the world of Serhiy Sidey as far as like maybe defined accomplishments you might have, or just like a general path that you foresee for yourself this time next year in 2025?
Yeah, well, I mean, the number one thing for me, man, is just like my motto, 1% better every single day. That's kind of be my main goal, right? Always get better. Ideally, want to fight again in March. That gives me roughly like 3.5 months right now from now, man. So like I want to be active, get to in a year, man. Ideally, like if I can, if everything goes right, I would like to get 3 fights in that year, man. Stay active, keep getting better. Just enjoy the martial arts lifestyle, man. Like this, bro. Like I wake up every day and I'm like this. Like I'm living my dream, man. I'm living everything I've ever wanted to live, man. Like I'm always trying to get better, and like I truly enjoy the process of trying to be a master at something, man. It's makes me very happy, and that's it, man. Just keep enjoying the ride. I only have so many years to do this, so I just want to enjoy it, and then when it's all said and done, like I did everything I possibly could in this sport, and then move on to something else.
Yeah, and I feel like you enjoy all aspects of what your life is. Like you've definitely worked to the point to like, I guess, curate your life whereby like everything you do is martial arts related. Like even outside of competing in the UFC, it seemed like you had a certain level of passion, even talking about like getting ready to, teach people and stuff like that, like teaching people like I guess even like later on and whatnot. And I've even gleaned that from some past conversations and stuff like that. So yeah, just it's great to be present and stuff like that. I get what you mean. I sometimes ask those questions just because it seems like, I don't know, like a thing to like get an idea of. But then I think about it a little deeper and I'm like, oh, if I was asked this question, I feel like maybe it would be a bit of a nebulous one for me because I try to, I guess, like I have goals for the future, obviously, but just trying to be like more so present and in the moment with it, I suppose, too.
Yeah, 100%, right? Like that I think that everybody should have those big goals, but it's like you kind of like identify that goal and then you kind of like have it as like a north star, right? Like that's the goal, but then to get to that goal, man, it's all about like what are you doing that day, right? That moment, like those all those days are going to add up, and like the more present you are in the moment on those days, the better chances of you reaching those goals are, right? Like I always try to break things down into like small, achievable things. I just find if I'm just focused on like, all right, win the morning, then win my afternoon, then win my night, like, and then go to bed and repeat that over and over and over again, like that compounds to a positive effect for sure.
And it's interesting because you mentioned March. Is that just like a month that sounds good in general? Like, does it, I guess, extend to the point of like a particular card you might be focused on? I guess, like, off the top of my head, like the one card I can kind of think of, like, I'm sure there's going to be multiple, obviously, but that UFC London event they just recently mentioned, like, I guess I did kind of talk about before about your first two UFC fights being in Canada. Like, is there the desire to put some stamps on the passport a little bit, or if everything kind of works out perfectly, like, is, competing all throughout Canada something cool to kind of have that like partisan sort of support and stuff like that?
Well, the only reason I'm choosing March, man, is just like the way I was just like, okay, I'll take the rest of November off, and then I like to do a 12-week camp. So then it'd be boom, 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 right? 3 months, all of a sudden it's March. So anytime in March would be great. And travel wise, bro, wherever they want to send me, I'd be down. Like I'm down. Like sure I like fighting Canada, but I'm down to go to London. I'm down to go to Australia, Abu Dhabi, like wherever they want to send me. It's all gonna be a cool experience, man. And like that, definitely the traveling part is something I want to do because I just want to like see different cultures and see different parts of the world. And if I can go do that and fight at the same time, like there's nothing better.
Yeah, well said, man, for sure. Yeah, it's been great getting to talk to you today, though. I want to be mindful of what you're, getting up to the rest of the day, though, and stuff like that. And just like you said, kind of enjoying that, downtime that one would have after getting a big victory like this. So I guess just kind of putting the ball in your court, man. I figured I kind of gave you the floor to see if you had a final thought you wanted to add as we're wrapping up here. I appreciate the time as always there, Siri.
Yeah, I mean, no, just I just wanted to say like, yeah, thank you for taking the time as well, man. Like, I know you've been interviewing me for a very, very long time, dude. Like, and like it's cool to see. Like, just like I was just like talking to my girlfriend before, and I was like, yeah, Dylan's been like interviewing me for a long time, and it's just cool to see that. Yeah, we'll keep it rolling, man. And dude, it'd be cool if one day you're interviewing me and we're fighting for the belt and shit, and like it'll be a cool full circle moment, bro. So we'll keep it up, man. And like always appreciate chatting with you, buddy.
Yeah, I know. I love the sound of that, man. Like, you definitely seem on a great course to be able to do that and whatnot. Like, looking towards the future optimistically, but also, present and in the moment, as we've kind of talked about. So, yeah, sounds like a perfect balance, man. Just really appreciate you making the time to talk about this great UFC Edmonton win. Looking forward to see what 2025 holds, maybe March specifically. Like, hopefully that pans out. But yeah, until then, man, you have a good rest of your day. And thanks so much for the insights.
Thank you, brother. See ya.